So if you can say, this is validated, this is the cost point, this is the speed, you're fine. If you say, this is really exciting, this cool stuff, and it's wow, and they think you're not in the real world, you're a researcher, or you're one of those data scientists, and I'm actually trying to earn some money.
Excellent, thanks. So Alex, you're sitting between the two, really, between the technology innovators and the clients. How do you organise it and ensure that you're producing insights?
Well, yeah, I guess I tend to look at this through an operational lens. And one of the things I was thinking about when listening to David, I guess, was the difference between something like Google Glass as a consumer device that they may all at one point own versus a sort of a tool that we can use for research. And I guess it's things like, how quickly is it going to become prevalent amongst consumers versus how much does it cost? And we got an idea then to equip a panel with this versus actually, on site, the use of it on site. So all those questions kind of inform how viable it is to do research with it. And at Kantar, and we're not alone in this, we've been doing eye tracking and neuroscience and facial recognition, virtual reality, looking at actually kind of life tracking devices, Fitbug, things like that. And like for me, it's biometrics that kind of tie all these things together. And I guess the tantalizing thing with something like Google Glass is this idea that it could become a consumer device. And when that happens, I guess the challenge becomes that it's actually another device where the research can take place. So we worry about different types of mobile. Suddenly we've got this other device where people can do surveys, and we've got all the same problems all over again. Should I say challenges? But it also becomes a channel. And I suppose the thing I'd be interested in David's point of view on this. When I think about Google Glass, I see it as the answer to. I see augmented reality. VR didn't take off, Second Life didn't take off, mobile, augmented reality didn't take off on mobile because people kept walking into lampposts. Google Glass kind of bridges that, and it creates a new channel for advertising, because I could be walking along and see an advert on the side of BHS, and it's not really there. And I'm also using the internet on there. So that kind of opens up possibilities for the need for research. But again, it kind of depends on the incidence, the number of people who've got it and what the practicalities are of using it. And also, the final point, I guess, is all that data, which, again, to your point, David, about needing technology to unscramble that, I think that's going to be one of the big issues as well.
Thanks. So, David, how are we going to bridge the super cool technology with the insights needs at the end client?
Well, to build off what he said, that is it going to be a consumer device, or is it going to be, or how is it going to be something that can be used by professionals? It's the view of most people, and my personal view, that Google Glass is not something that will become a major consumer device. And its main purpose is not to replace a smartphone or anything else, but I see it as a device that in certain fields, it can be used it can be used as the kind. I would say, in some fields revolutionize it, and in some fields enhance it, like the medical field and the market research field being the two main ones. In the medical field, it allows doctors to document things a lot faster, and in an emergency situation, where if they are if a paramedic is at an emergency somewhere in the field, they can live stream a video footage back to the hospital where doctors can analyze it, and while the patient is in transit, possibly help save that life if something could be done that the paramedic does not know what to do, but the doctor does. And then within market research, I think what's, like I said, compared to some of the other stuff that we saw today, it's not something that would totally replace people in the industry, but we think it's something that can definitely be used to gather more subconscious information, and definitely provide compared to text, provide a much better type of initial data to be worked through and analyzed there.
I'm just going to follow up on one of the video points that, because there was very little, we didn't have Q&A time at the end of your previous presentation. Normally, when we collect ethnographic trace information, so video, for example, it takes 3 hours for a human to review 1 hour of data collected in the field. At what stage is your automated processing of video? So if we have an hour of somebody cooking, what sort of information might that be able to be analysed at the moment, and what might be possible, say, in 2 years?
Okay, so let me, you said in 2 years it would be? Okay, so let me walk you through it. So you take the video of someone cooking, and a human does not look at it at all. It's the raw footage is immediately taken and dumped in to the piece of software. And the software will know that this is a video of cooking because you're going to give it predefined parameters of what's going on. So because it knows it's cooking, and remember that the thing is, it's not replacing market researchers, or whoever the people in the industry are. It's just kind of changing their job. So those experts will be used to define what needs to be taken out of the video. But so the first thing the video is going to want to do, it's going to want to figure out what is this person cooking. So what is it going to want to do? It's going to want to look for a main product. So it's going to look for a meat or something like that. And using object recognition technology, which is now at its peak and can be used with a 99% level of accuracy. It will know this is chicken, this is steak, this is something, and then it will try to analyze. So if it's a chicken, what kind of chicken is the person making? So based on the cooking example, I'm not that acquainted with, but so if it's taking, depending on the spices the person is taking or the ingredients the person is taking, it would then run that through a database of different meals that you can have with chicken, and it would try to figure out what it is based on the ingredients the person is taking.
Okay, so Alex, moving now to you. 2 years from now, a lot of this technology we've seen today more in place. Maybe we're going to have Nike Fitness hooked up. Maybe we're going to have Samsung's watches. Where do you think Kantar is looking to be with this sort of technology, and the other leading companies like GfK, Ipsos, etc.?
2 years doesn't feel like a very long time, if I'm honest. I thought about this.
Stretch it if you want.
Well, yeah, so I think in 2 years' time we'll probably still be refining mobile as a way of collecting data, and more so with biometrics, because you don't need, there are ways that you can kind of collect biometrics that don't necessarily require kind of game-changing technologies like this. So I kind of think in 2 years we will be mainly doing that. We'll be looking at how we will be using at some of these other devices that Bluetooth to your phone, some of these kind of health tracking things. We will be focused, I suppose, on how to bring data together from various places, not necessarily trying to collect it all through sort of new gadgets, mobile proxies, if you like. I'm thinking again of Google Glass. But if you wanted to push it out maybe 5 years, I guess my observation is that it's really difficult to know how the consumer device, the way people are using devices and how those devices change is going to play out. I used the example that the chap from Weave yesterday mentioned. He talked about the text. I know it's a cliche, but the way text messages ended up being used, the way we haven't responded on mobile payments necessarily in the way that was expected. So you've kind of got this interplay between what consumers decide they want to do as opposed to what we've expected them to do, what services get developed, how it gets used for marketing, and we've still got a pretty Darwinian environment for all these devices. When most people here have got a laptop, a tablet, and a phone, and I bet you all wish you only was using one, but you just can't shift them, can you? And now there's this prospect of a watch that is also a messaging device that connects to your phone, and now Google Glass, which is a more convenient way. So I guess you're going to have this melee of devices for quite a long time, I think the common thread, as I say, is one, biometrics, but not necessarily in 2 years' time from brand new devices.
Okay, Alex, I'm going to push you on one point then. We've got lots and lots of possible technologies coming along, smartphones, wearable technology, biometrics. Do you think this is going to push us towards doing most of our research with panel members? I won't call them professional respondents here, but people who have downloaded the app, got the equipment, signed up to this, shared their information, or could we be talking to the broader population?
I think it depends what what the research objectives are. I think there'll be cases where you'll need to do that if you want to go deep, and whatever the research objectives can stand a small enough sample. But I think there will be this idea of given that all these devices are connected to the internet through carriers, there will be some questions that we need a large sample to get the answers from. You won't be able to do it by putting apps on stuff, especially the more devices you've got, the harder it is to put an app on everything. So I think there'll probably be a split. There'll be some questions you can answer by deep diving on the device, and there'll be some where you really have to just gather data via, the kind of universal connection pipes, if you like.
And finally, Edward, putting a slightly different spin to that question, how does somebody on the client side decide which bits of this technology are really good and which are complete bollocks?
Well, you go to the obvious areas where this might make a difference in the shopping research experience and the whole progress with near-field communications, what that might mean for marketing and therefore for market research. Anything to do with out of home, if you've got a business objective, you're trying to understand for us, for example, organizational needs of people who are on the move a lot. This would be very valuable. So pushing it towards direction, which seems to make a lot of sense. Then there's a question of how many people have actually got the devices. Is that sufficient? If you have a panel, are they well equipped with it? Do they know how to understand it? Do you believe the word which was natural, which David, you used a lot, that this was a natural experience? I tried the Google Glass. I didn't find it very natural, but maybe that was just n=1. And so in terms of, I agree with very much what you were saying. I think you have to find out almost through trial and error where the technology ends up. And it's a moving target. If you do a research on this in 6 weeks' time, it's probably moved on. So your research from 6 weeks ago is invalid. Doesn't make it any less true. But in terms of how it would impact on the major, concept testing, attribute ranking, usage and attitude, I'm not sure. It could enrich it hugely, but you could also end up with masses and masses of data, which were not very useful to the marketing team. That would be my concern.
So, questions from the floor? Otherwise, I'll use one of my 20. Is that a question? Yes, Aaron.
So I'm intrigued by the Google Glass presentation. I love the insight through observation. I think that's the best way to get data is insight through observation, so it's implicit in that nature. And yet, the questions you append are explicit. So we go to implicit observation and say that it's wonderful that we can glean insight by observing what people do without asking them questions. And then you feed them images and ask them explicit questions about how they feel. It seems like there's a disconnect there.
David. What he was saying is that it's a bit of an echo back. You've got lots and lots of lovely video data, it's in the situation, but then you feed them images and you're asking explicit questions, and there is a substantial body of thought in our industry that explicit questions don't work very well.
Well, perhaps I communicated wrong in the presentation, but while we are setting parameters for it, I don't think that there's explicit questions that are being asked. So if we're taking a video from 100 people that shopped in IKEA, and we want to test if the advertisements for food were effective, because the way they've designed the store is once we get to the end, there's a giant food court there. So if we want to test and see if the food advertisements are effective, what we would do is we would take the video from these 100 people, and we would also have metadata such as their age, their gender, things like that. And then we would use object recognition to parse the video to figure out where these advertisements are, and within the video, and that would confirm that those are the advertisements that were in their line of sight. And we would also compare that with, in that path that they went, how many advertisements really exist in that exist there. And then what we would do is use the pupil tracking data to see if they looked at it, if they glanced over it, if they were deeply concentrated, and then see if in the end of the video footage they went and purchased something from the store. So if they didn't purchase something from the food court, and they did not, and they didn't see more than one or two of the ads, and the ones they saw, they simply glanced over. The software would come to a conclusion that person, and this is the most basic form of it, but that person did not see the advertisements, did not get hungry, didn't buy food. If it's someone that saw and was concentrated in all the advertisements, but did not go and purchase food, the software would show two possible outputs. One, they weren't hungry. One, they were not hungry, or one, they don't like a type of food. But then it would also take the account, what if they were hungry but the line was too long? So it would then see, was the line too long, how many people look at they were in line, and it can then also see with the video, the way that they were moving throughout the store, did it seem like they were in a rush? And if they seemed like they were in a rush, it would assume that's why they did not purchase the food. Although they wanted the food, they were in a rush, and that's why they didn't get in line, if that answers your question.
May I respond? May I interact here on that question?
We can't hear you, Aaron.
You can't hear that? Can you hear this?
Yeah.
So it's not clear how you're measuring hunger. I see attention and I see behavior, but I don't see much on the why behind the behavior that you're observing. And I think that may be a big challenge for the application of your technology.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to take that one offline because we're getting a bit much into one of the particular things as opposed to the big picture.
Thank you.
And I'm coming to Edward and Alex here, and quite often when we look at the industry, it is going in the direction that Aaron's been talking about, behavioural economics, implicit association, more advanced ways of inferring and finding out what people are doing. A lot of technology, and we've seen some presentations like that today, talk about asking very simple, direct questions with very impressive, clever technology. So do we have two opposing strands going on, do you think, in the industry at the moment?
I'm not sure. When you said with very clever technology, I'm thinking about the implicit stuff with the mobile smartphone. When you say very clever technology, do you mean the fact that the software had been written to, or is it clever research behind it?
No, I mean all the passive tracking sort of things that we're seeing, reaching people around the world with very quick questions, but then we're asking them things like, how happy are you, in terms of scales, which are pulling in the opposite direction to where the strand of the industry is going. And I wonder whether we're getting sometimes too absorbed in the tech, and then other people are getting absorbed in the method.
So we ought to, so I guess the simple answer is we ought to be measuring where we can measure, and where measurement gives us greater veracity, and we should be asking where it's necessary, because we want the why, and actually measurement. If you try and do it through measurement, you make inferences and you guess, and you don't necessarily know why. So I know that's a rather simplistic answer, but I think that should be our guiding light, which is if we can measure, we should, so we don't have to ask as much, but we should only do it where it is giving us a true answer, and if we have to ask, we should ask. That's the balance, I think.
Any thoughts, Edward?
I think anything that takes artificiality out of response has to be a good idea on the one hand. So I was very interested to hear that it was possible to do a 15-minute interview on a mobile phone. I certainly wouldn't have the patience to do that. And anything technology-wise which can help us make sense out of that. I mean, we heard about a river. We heard about that it was getting quicker and broader, but maybe it's getting dirtier as well. Maybe it's increasing its speed, and maybe there's a lot of rubbish in there. And anything that helps us sift through that, and any algorithm that really helps, and all this sort of Star Trek stuff that really helps us say, well, there are actually only a few data points that count, 1, 2, 3, it would be great. But Do I need to understand that?
Yes, I mean, I saw an advert yesterday which implied with their technique you could go from a business question to survey answers within minutes. Well, I've been in the industry 35 years. I'm not sure I can design a questionnaire in minutes because I need to think about what are the right things to be doing. We've got a microphone near you, Yanni?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to, one of the things I think we really need to knock on the head quite quickly, because we can, as an industry, we can get into a kind of a whirlpool that isn't very productive. And that's this notion that the truth can only be implicit, or it can come from explicit questions. And it's obviously not an either or. It's obvious that some people are really good at answering some questions very accurately. And as it happens, economists will tell you, behavioral economists will tell you that a happiness question is not a bad question. You just ask people happiness, you get good answers. If you ask them why, they'll struggle to explain to you why. So to the implicit-explicit thing, what we've got to figure out as an industry is when do questions work, and when do they need to be enhanced by the implicit stuff, and when do they need to be replaced by the implicit stuff. And I don't think we're quite there yet, because a lot of the validation for the implicit is still building. On the question to David, what was really interesting to me was that, and I don't think we would be making a very serious mistake if we underestimated the extent to which machines can automate. Because what I heard David saying was, Google Glass can collect enough information, and this would be my answer to Aaron. Google Glass can collect enough information about your journey through the store that either did end up with you standing in line or ended up with you walking out, to post a question which is explicit, which would be accurately answered. And that question would be something along the lines of, was it because you were hungry, or were you not hungry enough to stand in line for that long? And actually, people would answer that question, and they'd answer it accurately.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Do we have one more question? Okay, so David, I'm not going to come to you because you will actually know the answer to this. But if you had to invest a large chunk of your money and life into one of the technologies we see coming along, Alex, what would it be? And Edward, it'll be the same question for you in a moment.
You go first. Well, I can't think of a specific company, and it's just going to sound slightly repetitive, but the part of the industry would be to do with the collection of kind of biometric data, and the ability to do that as easily as possible. So we've been looking at a few ourselves and seeing which would be most viable as a completely unobtrusive kind of accompaniment to daily life. So that you essentially, really to the point about Google Glass being unobtrusive, you're unaware that we are learning about your emotion or your physical state at all time. So I would invest in whichever of the suppliers we sort of start to realise are going to do the job, that one.
Right. You want to invest in the winner. Edward, which technology, if you were going to invest in a technology?
My favorite is not just on facial recognition, it's the whole notion of body language and the way that you're talking, what it says about how you feel. Am I leaning backward? Do I have my legs across? Am I going like this? Do I am frowning? It's the whole package. And I'm not quite sure where physiognomy is as a science and how valid it is and how good a machine could really pick up my facial expressions in this light and transport it. But something that could really pick up the emotion of body language and take that maybe also into maybe tracking my pulse. You know, my pulse has gone up. Why has it gone up? Have I seen a picture of somebody extremely beautiful, or it's because somebody said something really outrageous that made me wonder about the future of market research?
Okay, I'd like to thank the panel here and you for your questions. Thank you.